up, everyone? Welcome to the live stream. This is the moment that we've all been waiting for. The presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is going to start now in a couple of minutes. A debate that's going to be extremely important, maybe the only debate that we're going to have between the two candidates. We will have to see whether they can agree on another debate. But so far, this is the only one that they've agreed to. The rules have been kept to what they were supposed to be. The mics will be muted when the candidate is not speaking. That was the big point of contention here on this ABC debate. With Kamala Harris wanted the mics turned on, but the Donald Trump campaign refused to do so. This is going to be in 2 minutes now. One of the craziest election really that we've seen in modern time, and probably if this turns out to be the only debate that's going to be in this election, then this would be the most important debate in, I don't know, in probably modern elections. You know, as you will all remember, last time around the CNN debate, Joe Biden was the candidate for the Democrats. And after a terrible performance at the debate, Joe Biden quit the race, replaced by his VP Kamala Harris. And now Kamala Harris facing Donald Trump on this debate on ABC. Let's go and have a look now at what is happening. This debate should certainly be about to start anytime now. Let's see. Let's move on here to our grid. We have all the channels here. And let's, I guess, start with, that will be probably ABC that we're going to be listening to first. And then we'll switch between CNN and Fox News to see, sort of get the temperature of what both parties are feeling about their candidates and the debate and how they feel their candidate has done. So let us move on right away with
former President
here.
Donald Trump. Their first face-to-face meeting in this presidential election, their first face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing after his last debate. Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special, the most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
We've introduced here this debate with Kamala Harris, of course, now the new candidate for the Democrats. And while they go on here on this commercial, let's continue to talk a little bit, but they're about to start now.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns.
While we wait for them to bring the candidate, let's remind everybody of the situation. So, of course, other than Kamala Harris being brought at the last minute, being brought without a primary election, a very, very rare thing in modern politics. Last time around was a long, long time ago, decades ago. And, you know, on the other side, Donald Trump, I can't remember ever a presidential candidate having the justice system going after him. Donald Trump, I believe, 34 counts of felony for election, maybe not election fraud, but campaign violation. That is it in the case. And the judge has decided to sort of postpone the, and here they are. Let's cut to
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
And Kamala
Welcome to you
Harris
both.
here,
It's wonderful to have
going
you. It's
all
an
the way
honor
to
have you
Donald
both
Trump to
here
shake
tonight.
his hand.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start-up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us.
Donald Trump has brought the chaos right away, moving with several topics and making it difficult for her to answer. Let's see what she says.
Public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all, in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected
Donald Trump
again.
shaking his head.
I believe very
He
strongly
probably has a
that the American
rebuttal to
people
that
want
already
a
worked
president
out.
who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce-back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having
And she's not answering the question at all. No mention of the tariffs.
Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states. And the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter, because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to, because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans.
Interesting diversion here. Donald Trump, who refuses to answer the question and sort of filibusters and segues into the student loan issue.
Did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America.
And then again, Kamala Harris not answering the question and not saying whether she would support any restriction.
And dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women.
And so we can see how polarizing this issue is and how important and how both candidates sort of have a side of their party that is yes and no. And they have to navigate this issue in a way that doesn't upset any of their base. And so they can't really answer the question when it comes to this topic. They have to navigate and sort of say neither yes, neither no. I'm not going to say, but I am for great things and I'm a good person.
Body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v. Wade,
answer the question. Would you veto?
You could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th month, and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly.
ABC
but my question to you tonight,
throwing a lifeline to Kamala Harris, not cornering her into answering the question that Donald Trump has asked and moving the subject now to immigration.
Who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this
it's going to be interesting to see how Donald Trump responds to that accusation.
Who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. You know,
the trademark cackle
I
here.
think one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people were just killed, viciously and violently killed, and I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down, except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage.
Very interesting to see here Kamala Harris mentioning turning the page as if Kamala Harris wasn't the current administration. And there's been, for the last few weeks, this push to try to push and show Donald Trump as being the one who sort of is handling this country, even though he's been out of the office for 4 years
win the rest
now.
on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
to stop
Harris,
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions
Kamala.
changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest
on the Inflation
in
Reduction
diverse
Act here.
sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up
the Biden
a middle-class kid.
administration killing the Keystone XL pipeline on the first day. So, you know, it's hard to believe when she said things
the values
like
I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, She was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute. I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Trump coming.
She went out.
I'm talking now line.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you,
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this.
And so here, Kamala Harris using the talking points, sort of out of context quotation of Trump. Let's see his response.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread
standing.
fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by whiskers. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think
up.
we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Very tough question here for Kamala Harris.
Let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel. Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation. And now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the...
And of course, here you can see the trick that Trump has played on her of getting her to embrace Israel live on TV, while of course a whole segment of her base, of the Democratic base, is supporting Palestine in this issue.
Of Putin, that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un, and it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the important...
And again, Kamala Harris sort of slinging mud at the bun monster. And of course, it doesn't really work. You know, you can attack and throw ad homs at Donald Trump, but it's not going to change anything. He's such a, you already know that about him. So, insisting on it doesn't really do any damage to him.
Endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
And here is the first commercial break here in
the ABC News presidential debate.
Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Commercial break now going on in ABC. And so far, we've seen a lot of sort of filibuster, a lot of not answering the questions. And, there hasn't really been much here that has been said. Let's have a quick look here. If the other channels, no, they're all on commercial. But really, in terms of policy, not much has been discussed. It's sort of like we're seeing Donald Trump rehashing a lot of the themes and the things that he's been saying before. Nothing really new on his side. And he's sort of using the same strategy that he was using in the debate versus Joe Biden, which is sort of meddling issues together, not really answering the question directly, but offering segues and attacks onto other issues, sort of trying to, take the focus away of Kamala Harris the same way that he did with Joe Biden. But of course, Joe Biden had a little bit of trouble keeping track of all the issues mentioned by Trump, and he was doing that. But here with Kamala Harris, she's basically not participating into this debate of idea, and she's using the same strategy that he is using, sort of saying whatever she wants and talking about the issues that she wants that matter to her instead of answering the questions from the moderators. And so in this regard, we can see that both candidates are sort of using the same strategy, and it is the most efficient strategy, for politicians. You never want to sort of give an anchor and a host of a show the ability to corner you with a question and, sort of having this gotcha moment where you cannot answer. And so, what you'll see going on in this debate, as we've seen now at the beginning of this debate, is sort of the candidates always talking about what they want. And when the moderator is going to ask them something, they're going to say, oh, let me first talk about XYZ. And, these will be sort of talking points that have been rehearsed, and they already know, they have ways to attack the other candidate. Now, for Kamala Harris, there's a few things that I noticed. One was in the beginning, the microphone of her was sort of too sensitive, and we could hear her sort of breathing in the microphone and, making some strange noises. But it seems that they've kind of corrected that throughout the interview. But then in terms of policy, of course, very, very vague onto the policy. And, it makes sense because the policies of Kamala Harris, really, they're the policies of Joe Biden. There's nothing different. And so Kamala Harris is sort of in this difficult situation where, on one hand, she has to, embrace the policies of Joe Biden, which, America has rejected, and they rejected the policies of Joe Biden with the polling that we saw of Joe Biden, which forced him to retire from the race. And so on one side, she has to sort of, promote her record and the record of the Biden-Harris administration. And on the other, she needs to differentiate herself from Joe Biden because, of course, if America didn't want Joe Biden, then you cannot just bring Kamala Harris on and be like, oh, here's Kamala Harris. It's the same thing as Joe Biden, but you didn't like Joe Biden and you should like her. So she has to bring sort of her own flavor of politics, her own policies. And she doesn't really have that. So she has this very difficult task here in a debate like this, where it's of course, it's not going to be hours and, not something that's long enough to really go in the details of policies. But you sort of have to bring, the broad lines of what an administration, Harris administration would look like. And, she doesn't really have the material to do that because really, a Harris administration would be the same thing as a Biden administration. And so now she has to sort of like do this strange dance saying, I'm the same, but I'm not the same. And I'm going to bring something that's going to be different and better, even though I'm already here. And this is already my policies. Let's go back now to the debate.
That if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interests for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And
so this is exactly what was said, right? She has to bring her own flavor of politics, even though her flavor of politics is really Joe Biden's flavor of politics. She has to differentiate herself from the current administration, even though she's already in charge.
rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work...
And when she did so, she called it the northern flank, and we remember that.
It's righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator.
Probably a slippery slope here for Kamala Harris to be sort of downplaying what a Trump foreign policy would be on the subject when she's in charge now, and the foreign policy aspect of Ukraine has been terrible.
And he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, 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 and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking...
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said, going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago.
And here is a pretty weak segment of attack from Donald Trump on Kamala Harris, because of course he could mention her record as a prosecutor and withholding evidence to keep an innocent man on death row in California while she was a prosecutor there.
Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden.
But
I don't know
yeah,
the gentleman.
He doesn't
she
mention
says,
that. He could do much better, I think.
The worst
tonight.
inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life.
And here she is sort of waffling again and, you know, sort of turning the conversation into sort of her promoting her agenda. But, you know, the truth is, you know, I don't know why she keeps mentioning about the $50,000 in tax deduction that she wants to give small business owners, you know, after having spent, you know, a whole administration reinforcing big business at the expense of small business. And then, you know, when the election time comes, offering, you know, a little bit of cash against taxing businesses all across the board more more highly. Let's see what they're saying.
To confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need to respond.
President Trump,
No, the former president has said something twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it, and we're going to replace it. But remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health care system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed, for the first time, Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice President Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People
Trump
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries.
And while he goes on to talk about other subjects, of course, this is a slippery slope for Kamala Harris to mention the auto sector, when really the auto sector has been decimated by the Green New Deal and the electrification, all you know, the subsidies that were given that really you know, pushed the auto manufacturer to follow these EV you know, manufacturing. And here we see they're going on a break. Perfect. We can talk a little bit about that. The auto manufacturing sector in the U.S. that is now facing, you know, a very difficult situation with the Chinese EVs that have already been. Let me switch here, go back to the quad to see what is happening on the other channel. But as I was saying, the auto manufacturing now that is facing a drastic situation with China building EVs for as low as $10,000. They've really sort of managed to catch up. And, you know, you say what you will about China maybe... you know, getting hacking into companies. Let's just talk about it, and really sort of stealing intellectual property from U.S. automakers, and they've sort of caught up the gap that there was between Tesla, that was ahead of everyone in terms of electric cars, and now we have BYD, the Chinese auto company, that is basically making cars that are really comparable to Tesla's, but at a fraction of the price. And of course, these cars haven't yet flooded onto the US market or the European market, but the Europeans now have put tariffs on Chinese EV, 100% tariff on Chinese EV. So the same thing that Donald Trump wants to do, with the Chinese autos and Chinese manufacturing globally. But we can see that the European Union has already taken this step, getting a 100% tariff on these EVs. And of course, it is sort of necessary. No, country or union that wants to keep its own sovereignty and keep the ability of them to manufacture engines and automobiles and really weapons, because a lot of weapons will require engine, whether you're talking about tanks, about trucks, about even boats or aircraft carriers, you name it. All this requires, some type of engines aboard. And, if you sort of lose the ability that your country has to develop industrial programs, if you let China come in and sort of replace all the auto manufacturing sector and the heavy industry that you have in your country, when you have a problem and a war starts, then you're 100% dependent on basically your geopolitical enemies into providing you the pieces that are essential for you to build the weapons that you need to defend yourself. And we're seeing China sort of do that in many, many different industries. We see them also do the same thing with chips, semiconductors, these chips that are absolutely necessary for everything that we buy today, whether it is simple consumer products, anything that you can buy now in your house, even a toaster is going to have microchips in them to be able to function. And from that to the most sophisticated aircraft parts or whatever, complex system, AI chips, China now is sort of like using their industrial and manufacturing capacity to just undercut all the US industry and US manufacturers. And, of course, China is sort of a little bit of a different system when the government sort of can pump cash, into this industry that are strategically important to China. And there's really no answer that either the US or Europe has to reply, because they have their own free market legal framework in which the government cannot really do that, because they are trade practices that they have to abide to. And so China is sort of using, these points of contention to be able to put the US in a strategically difficult situation. And of course, in that, the auto sector is absolutely vital to national security. And the last 4 years have been terrible, really, for the auto sectors. And you can just check the share price of most auto manufacturers in the US now, with Ford losing up to, I can't remember what the number exactly is, but it's something ridiculous, like a $50,000 or $100,000 per EV. But let's go back to the debate.
The dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
And here it is, the debate between
And we are here
Donald Trump
live on ABC with our
Harris.
post-debate comments. I'm Martha.
And we will go on to the commentary in a little moment. But let's take a minute here to debrief a little bit this debate. And really, there was nothing that wasn't expected. There was no, terrible gotcha moment, something that's going to be, that's going to change the course of this election, like it happened in the first debate with Joe Biden sort of mumbling around and unable to find his words. We have two candidates here that I think we're not that strong. Two people who really didn't do a great job at the debate, and it's sort of a shame, really, honestly, to see these two people being the candidates that you have to choose from for your next president, because really you see on stage two people who did a terrible job, really, at debating, and a terrible job at presenting their ideas and their vision in terms of what policy would be. And, they try to sort of draw the lines as saying, oh, well, I fight for these people, and this is sort of what I represent. But it was a lot of waffling around, there was no concrete ideas that were mentioned, real policies that were mentioned. A lot of it was, mostly in terms of who I am and who I represent. And, we saw Kamala Harris talking, and even in her closing statement, but even also in her opening statement, talking about, I want to build an opportunity economy, but really not really telling you into substance what that would mean. And, sort of, the thing that she came up with, I'm not Donald Trump. I have, my values, and I like, to treat people in the way they want to be treated. But really, what she failed to do today was to sort of bring her brand of politics, as we have mentioned, earlier during the break, and to try to differentiate herself from Joe Biden. Many times she repeated in the debate, I am not Joe Biden, you're not running against Joe Biden. But what she really didn't manage to do, and she didn't manage to show and convince the audience as to why is she not Joe Biden, what makes her different than Joe Biden, and what a Kamala Harris administration would look like, and how it would differ from a Joe Biden administration. And in that regard, she didn't really manage to, to really show America the picture of how she would be different than, the current administration. On the other side, we have Donald Trump sort of sticking with his shtick, and, going on the offensive on many different topics, and sort of recitating over and over his 5 talking points as to why the Biden-Harris administration has been terrible on inflation, energy, the border, foreign policies. And there was really nothing new that he proposed in this debate that he hasn't, mentioned in the 40 or so media appearances that he has done since the first debate against Joe Biden. And so we already knew pretty much, where he stands. And in terms of, the policies and who these people are and what an administration of theirs would look like, then of course it's a lot easier for Donald Trump to say, okay, I'm going to do exactly the opposite of what the current administration is doing. And, as we've mentioned, like sort of the 5 talking points, they're doing bad on this, and that, and I'm going to do the opposite, and that's how I'm going to be different. And, when I was president, everything was better, and, they're doing bad. And, sort of for, how long, maybe a couple of hours now, or almost an hour and a half, he has repeated, sort of this mantra over and over. And we didn't really get any new information, but we got, sort of the idea of what he stands for. But of course, Kamala Harris, a much more difficult situation, her coming sort of midway through the campaign, replacing Joe Biden in a free fall, and now having to come in, having done only one interview since she got nominated versus, 40-something interview for Donald Trump. And of course, they wanted to keep her away from the cameras because she was sort of on this sugar high of the nomination, and they didn't want her to come and destroy it. Basically, that's what it was. And so it made it a lot more difficult for her to sort of show what she is about, because she hasn't been telling, anyone. She hasn't been doing the media appearances that would have helped her carry her message and carry her politics. And now she is on the big stage here, and, in a format that only allows sort of short answers. And she has to sort of defend her record, but also promote what the Kamala Harris brand of politics would be without, any groundwork laid in front of her in the past few weeks. And so, she's coming in there as a blank slate. And it's very difficult when you have hosts who are sort of asking questions and directing the conversation for you to bring and say, okay, I am about this, and that, several subjects, like we say, the opportunity economy that she wants to build. Well, we don't know what that means. It's just empty words because, how you opportunity economy, it doesn't mean anything. What means something is you tell us exactly what steps are you going to take to improve the economy. But, we didn't get any sense of that. Except for, those $50,000 in tax reduction, hypothetically on businesses that in the first year are not going to be paying any taxes anyway because they're not going to make money. So, there was nothing really concrete except, just hypothetical talk. And we really didn't see, what would have been the necessary step for the Democrats to give us a true idea, a real sense of what Kamala Harris administration would look like. So in this sense, she has sort of failed to bring a clear vision of what she stands for, whereas Donald Trump, we already know what he stands for. We have seen, for many, many years what he stands for. But Kamala Harris today is still a mystery. And if this turns out to be the only debate that we're going to have from here until the election, then she has failed to give us, a clear picture of what her brand of politics is about. And my guess is that she's going to have to, agree to another debate. She's going to have to get another debate. But the question then becomes, is Donald Trump going to let her get another debate? Because after failing to sort of carry her message on this first debate, then maybe Donald Trump just doesn't need to agree to another debate. And he can sort of reverse the situation where now she's going to have to go out there in front of the media, try to promote her ideas and her policies, and it's going to open her to, a very difficult situation, of course, because now she doesn't have the sort of experience to do media appearances in front of, sometime hostile hosts that are going to sort of poke holes into her message. But anyway, let's now move on to our mosaic and see what the talking heads are saying here about this debate and the performances. I guess we can start here with, let's do CNN and let's see what they're saying.
And certainly anything he faced in 2020 has figured out what no one else figured out how to do. Certainly Marco Rubio didn't figure it out by going after little hands. He debased himself, as many have. I want to show just some key moments where she needled Donald Trump on the most sort of obvious, basic things that we all know he has said, we all know are weak points, to devastating effect. Let's just take a look.
Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. If you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already. Just ask people who have worked with him.
John King, it was the moment she talked about his crowd size of all things, and people, not even was crowd size, it was people being bored and leaving his rallies early. I don't think he ever recovered from that. He started shouting, and he never stopped.
She triggered him there. I think she was uneven at the top. Not a bad answer, first answer in the economy, but not a great answer. She got her footing during the abortion conversation, where she felt more comfortable, and then she triggered him with the people leave your rallies. And he lost it. And he was angry. From that moment on, his voice went up. He started angering. He told a lot of lies. Daniel Dale's going to be up all night. We should start a GoFundMe for his espresso machine. He did. And so what did she do? She triggered him on COVID, January 6th and democracy, abortion, chaos, lies, and his anger. What are those? Those are the issues that turned the American suburbs away from Donald Trump and why he lost the 2020 election. Those are the voters who were waiting to see if she...
And of course, very interesting here, you see how different the reaction is from CNN. If you go to the other videos, you can see, the reaction of CNN that they were having after the Biden debate. And it's totally different. Here you can tell they're acquired. There is no turning back now. You have to be 100% down with Kamala. There is no, sort of second guessing what she said. And, the points that they're mentioning, they're not really that convincing, to be honest. Let's listen to him.
One like this, and the degree to which she dominated this. And, part of it was butt kicking, and part of it was kind of someone doing it themselves in. I said earlier, jokingly, that, when they said he's Muhammad Ali in the debates, that, their fear has to be that he knocks himself out. He kind of helped. But she set him up, as John said. But these things are more than about issues. These things are tests. These campaigns, these debates, they're oral exams for the hardest job on the planet. Sure. And people judge you in these moments, and they judge whether you have the mettle to stand up to that pressure, to be coherent, to deliver a case. And she certainly did that tonight.
Van, she whooped him. She just whooped him. And I think that there's been a desire, in good fiction, there's like wish fulfillment. Like, you watch a movie because you want something to happen, like some great romance. People have wanted to see somebody put this bully in his place. And people have watched contender after contender fail to put him in his place. She got up there and she put him in his place. She baited him, and then she spanked him. She baited him, and then she spanked him. And not only did she pass the commander-in-chief's test, he failed it. He failed it. Do you want this guy dealing with a dictator when he can literally just be, you could see the punches coming. He couldn't get out of the way.
If you can so unhinge somebody by saying people leave your rally, any world leader can manipulate you into anything.
So I think that she passed the test. He failed it. But I think also she was speaking for the people. She really was speaking for the people. I think the right wing may not see it, but she kept coming back to a middle-class background. He kept talking about himself and himself. He went down every rabbit hole imaginable.
And, you see sort of the bias of CNN here. And, once again, a totally different vibe from, the first debate where they all started sort of dogpiling on Joe Biden. But here, they're mentioning things that, it's like they watched a different debate, where something that was totally insignificant then sort of, no one noticed. And, they are sort of like insisting on it as if this was the most important moment of the debate when, really it wasn't. I'm going to be doing shorts of this debate, and I'll probably do 20 shorts before I'll get to this one where she was mentioning the size of, his rallies. It was obviously not something that's important or even interesting in terms of policies or even the candidates. It was sort of a little bit of a dig to try to get a rise out of him. Did she get it? I didn't notice it. I don't think anybody noticed it, but I'm sure, the producers on the CNN set told them, you guys all have to insist on this, and you have to sort of, shape the opinion and spin the moment into she put the bully in his place. And, I'm guessing this is going to be the messaging that we're going to hear over the next few days, from the mainstream media. Oh, Kamala Harris, like she put him in his place. But, really mentioning this debate size and the crowd at the debates, it really wasn't really a winning strategy for Kamala Harris to question the size of Donald Trump's meeting, because we've seen how huge the crowds are for him. So that wasn't really, a sort of winning strategy. But the question is this the only thing that they're going to talk about? Because if the one main talking point that CNN gets after seeing this debate is Harris baits Trump in contentious first debate, if it's, oh, she got a rise out of him, then it's disastrous for the Democrats, because the goal for Kamala Harris today was not to come and get a rise out of Donald Trump. The goal for Kamala Harris was to come in and explain to the American people what her policies are. And in that regard, she did not succeed.
And was talking about conspiracy theories and other things. And on policy proposals that matter to the people who will settle the election, he had nothing to say.
I think she showed up as herself. She is a prosecutor. She can prosecute the case. She is not afraid to hold people accountable. That is how she started her career, and she did just that. And she laid some breadcrumbs in her opening statement talking about, you're going to hear a lot of lies. And every time she tripped him up a little bit, she didn't then try and respond to him. She just said, see what I told you. I told you what you were going to get. I'm keeping him honest. She also helped turn the page when she said, you're not running against Joe Biden. That was a subtle reminder for Americans for the last 2 years that said they didn't want that rematch. And the last time they watched the debate, it was a rematch. And she was like, guess what, folks? I'm here. Here's an alternative. Here's a path to the future. And the final thing I'll say is,
and as we said, she did not succeed in doing that. She didn't manage to differentiate herself from Joe Biden. And that is the reason why she had to repeat several times, I am not Joe Biden, because really we don't know what the difference in policy is. And again, she didn't manage to bring an idea to America what her brand of politics would be.
And he couldn't get back on track. I mean, say what you want, friends, but she nailed it tonight.
Okay, now from the other side.
The other America.
Yeah, the other America, right? The red America.
Yeah.
So, John, I agree that she passed the test. Does she look presidential? Did she do a good job up there? She did pass that test. But she was very light. You're complaining about Trump saying you don't have details on your plan. No details provided on anything here but for her. She was very good at kind of rattling off her 2-minute answers, but then never really answered the questions. I think red America will look at this and say, I mean, I see it in the tweets. I never thought I'd say this, but CNN did such a great job on the debate and being fair, where ABC was not fair. This was a 3-on-1 at times versus Trump. They were demanding Trump be very specific on answers. But Kamala Harris, when asked about her values changing and having to articulate the differences of why she was for reparations, not for reparations, she said, it listed a very long list, and she said, I'll get to each of those. And then she didn't get to any of them.
I would be curious to see the time, who had more time, because my sense was that Donald Trump was given more time. I don't know.
No, but I'm just saying, Anderson, but my point is not time. My point is there was not a demand. David Muir didn't say, well, Madam Vice President, are you going to answer that question? Where he did do that with Trump. There was more aggressive follow-up on the Trump questioning than there was on...
Isn't that sort of the responsibility of the candidate?
But David, when it's supposedly... This is supposedly a neutral territory, right? And when the moderators have their thumb on the scale, Republican voters are going to watch this and say...
I think it was two very specific questions, like yes or no. Is there anything you regret about January 6th? No answer.
Well, then how about this? How about this?
So we sort of get the picture here on CNN, except for this guy who represents the other side. The rest of the panel all acquired to the cause of Kamala Harris, and they're sort of, fawning all over her, but they're not really presenting much substance into just, oh, she got a rise out of him. And that's not much. That's not much for what could be the only presidential debate that these two are going to be doing. Now, let's have a look now, I guess, at... should we go? Well, ABC, we've already done their... not covering is. Let's go on
taxpayer-funded
Fox
sex
News now,
change
and let's listen
operations.
to what they're
She
saying.
supports reparations, the $93 trillion Green New Deal, which would be the end of capitalism. She co-sponsored it. Government health care for all, the elimination of private health insurance.
Right.
How does ABC not bring that up?
Not a single one of those things was asked.
How did they not bring up? She said we got to not say radical Islamic terrorism or illegal aliens.
But President Trump did a good job of injecting that in there. And in the end of the debate, he said the most important thing, and that is she's been there for 4 years. All these things she's promising, they haven't done. And frankly, she wouldn't answer the most important question she was asked all night. Are Americans, she was asked this, are Americans better off today than they were 4 years ago? She didn't even answer it. She went on to talk about how she was born to a middle-class family, raised in Canada for part of that time in what apparently is not a middle-class neighborhood. But nonetheless, she went into her biography. And I think she was exposed tonight. The talking heads, you know, they analyze this because they all want to pretend like Kamala Harris was born on July 24th of this year. She has a record. She has a record as a senator, and she has a record as vice president. And Americans tonight got a glimpse of who she really, what she really believes, what she really stands for, and what direction she'll actually take our country. And I think that was a big win, big win.
Does this move the needle in your view?
I think it does, because there's a lot of voters. Remember, voters in the real world don't analyze this like the people that talk on cable news. They're viewing it in their mindset, okay, who's this lady? And they start hearing these things. Hold on a second, she helped bail out rioters? Hold on a second, she wouldn't answer the question about at what point should an abortion not be allowed, you know, the day before the due date. She wouldn't answer that question. They pick up on these things. And for her to brag about Afghanistan, she bragged about Afghanistan. Okay, she said Joe Biden got us out. He was run out of there. And not only was he run out of there, we lost $90 billion worth of American equipment that they're parading down the street. There are a lot of real people in the real world who are not political junkies who are going to vote and decide this election, who watched tonight. They saw the man that was president, and they remember their lives were better when he was president. They were safer, they were more prosperous, we were more respected in the world. And then they saw this person, they didn't know a lot about her, and now they're beginning to learn facts about her that I think will be decisive.
Senator, great to see you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, now,
That was
according
Marco
to
Rubio.
the Washington Post, the Harris campaign is now saying they want a second debate.
To try to get under Trump's skin. I mean, she was talking about his crowd sizes. She was talking about his former officials who are now criticizing him. She brought up January 6th and all of these moments. And he did seem to take the bait. Even Trump advisors were saying that to me. Was that the strategy going into this debate for your party?
Well, look, only Kamala Harris knows what her strategy was on this, but I will tell you, he took the bait because he's completely self-centered. He only cares about himself. And so instead of just ignoring a comment about crowd size, instead focusing on the needs of the crowd, the needs of the people that he was talking to, he could only focus on himself. He is someone who is so self-absorbed that he can't possibly do a good job for the American people.
She's still been underwater in latest polling in your home state. I mean, she's been doing better in Michigan and Wisconsin than she has in Pennsylvania, but still struggling a bit. And what we saw from polls, that voters wanted to know more about her.
It's very interesting here that, you know, sort of the message on the left seems to be, let's focus on this, you know, 10-second moment that was mostly insignificant. And, you know, it doesn't really look like they have much to say. Because, of course, if there was major policy gotcha moments, then they would already be talking about something else. But if the only thing you can talk about is, oh, she got a rise out of him by mentioning, you know, by attacking his ego, then it really leaves the audience and America who wanted to hear about policies, you know, sort of on the light side, when it comes to real substance about politics. Let's go back here on
foreign
Fox
policy.
News,
I actually thought on foreign policy she was the weakest.
Ted Cruz
it
here.
was absurd when she turned to Donald Trump and says, well, everyone knows you were weak and ineffective. Listen, if Donald Trump were still in the White House, the two wars that broke out under her leadership and Joe Biden's would not have happened. Russia would not have invaded Ukraine, and we would not have the war in Israel.
And on ABC, we have, I believe he is the share.
Does that matter to the voters? How do you think she did tonight?
Well, I think rightfully so. I think voters deserve to know the candidates that they're voting for, and I think she did an excellent job tonight, talking about not only her values, but talking about her plan for the American people. And I think that was the big difference tonight. She focused on how do I help Americans dealing with several challenges, the challenges of child care, the challenges of affordable housing, the challenges of rising grocery prices. And I think she addressed all of that. And I think the American people are giving her a fresh look, and I think she did an excellent job.
Donald Trump, the former president, says that she's a flip-flopper. She can't be trusted because her issues have evolved so much over the years. Do you think that she properly addressed that tonight?
Absolutely. I think that she hit it direct on and talked about, for example, with fracking in healthcare. She said she wouldn't ban fracking as vice president. She didn't ban fracking, and she has no intention on banning fracking. When she talked about healthcare, she said her values was always that healthcare should be a right and not a privilege just for the rich. And she talked about how to expand healthcare. So I think she did a very good job of going into her policies and how they align with her values as growing up in a middle-class family, and how that relates to the families in the United States right now.
Another thing heading into tonight, the polls showed that voters, for the most part, trusted Trump more on some key issues like immigration and the economy. Kamala Harris did not answer the question right off the top of whether Americans are better now than they were 4 years ago before Joe Biden took office. Is that going to be a continued problem for her?
4 years ago, 50% of the schools in this country were closed. You had thousands.
Pandemic.
But 50% of the schools in this country were closed. 10 million people were out of work. You had businesses shut down. And now you have a resurgence, 16 million jobs created, schools open. So I think what the vice president was doing, and she did a good job of doing, was articulating where we started, where we are now, and what her plans and how it would chart a new way forward. And I think she did a good job of that.
I want to go ahead and take a listen.
And so here we get his answer, but, you know, it's really not something that's satisfying. And it's going to be, you know, as the host mentioned here, it's going to be an issue for her going forward because, you know, it's very difficult to sort of like attack the record of Donald Trump saying, oh, well, you know, the pandemic is because of him. Well, it wasn't really because of him. You know, you cannot assign to Donald Trump, you know, something like the pandemic. And, you know, it's very difficult for them to be saying Donald Trump did such a terrible job and he had a pandemic and still the economy, people felt more confident about the economy under Donald Trump with a pandemic than they do with Joe Biden out of the pandemic. And that, of course, is not going to play well. And that's why, of course, she did not answer that question. Are Americans better now than they were 4 years ago? Because, of course, you cannot really justify that. But let's see. Now, let's move to CNN. And let's see. Or we have two interesting guests here.
Also true that she's making inroads with black men.
What do you think? I thought she said it because his response was he didn't care, right? He didn't care about the race or she can be whatever it is she wants to be, which essentially was not only condescending and patronizing, but also demonstrably inaccurate based on the statements that she actually laid out as to his concern for race and gender and beyond. And I think that she was waiting to address that particular moment in a way not to choose her audience, but to respond to what he had to say. And I think the idea of her talking about her race and her gender, which are both quite obvious to the American voter, the American people, I think in many ways that is an attempt for him to try to bait her, to suggest that that is Trump over her qualifications, her skills, her value adds as a contributing member of the administration, as a senator, as an AG and beyond. And I think she's cognizant of the way in which America also views women of color in positions of power. And I think that she was waiting for the opportunity to address a specific claim as opposed to what do you think about race and racism?
It also felt to me like
a funny Chiron here, Trump on defense in first debate with Harris. And, that seems to be what's going to be the motto and the talking point that we're going to see now in the next few days from the mainstream media. But, once again, doesn't offer much substance to just say, oh, he's on the defense without really
homes that are unaffordable, a wide open southern border, rising fentanyl deaths. This is happening because of her failed leadership. And all we need to remind the American people of, and I think Donald Trump did a great job of this tonight, is the reason why these problems happen is because Kamala Harris failed to do her job.
The thing is, she's 50 days, and prior to tonight, she does one interview, no press conferences. You're out there every day.
Yep.
Between you and President Trump, you're nearing, 50 combined?
Sure.
And it's still a mystery. It's like the candidate protection program, and the media keeps her in there. I have all of these files, the Kamala files, the Walls files, them in their own words. This was all available to ABC tonight. You said this about fracking. You said this about drilling. You said this about sex change operations that taxpayers pay for criminals and for illegal immigrants, free housing, health care, education for illegal immigrants, the elimination of private health care, all of these positions that she's taken, and it's amazing that we're this far, that we're this close to an election, we don't have these answers.
No, that's exactly right. Well, she's running a campaign based on vibes, and she's running
vibes. What the hell is a vibe? Are we in the 60s?
It feels like it sometimes. I feel like watching Kamala Harris like I've taken some psychedelics, but look, she is a total disaster, Sean, and she runs away from her record. This is the most striking thing is, if you're the vice president, you've been in power for 3.5 years, is she running by saying, look what we did to lower your grocery prices, look what we did to make the world more secure?
She can't.
She can't because her record is one of failure. And we just have to remind the American people of this, Sean. I mean, look, I think if you watch the debate, you're sitting at home, you're an undecided voter, what you saw is a person who repeats slogans instead of respecting you enough to treat you like an adult. Donald Trump, and he gets criticized by the left for this, by the way.
A little bit of Marco
He has been
Rubio
president.
here
Americans
on
have lived
ABC.
under the Trump presidency. He's well defined on these things. And a lot of things he said tonight, it's part of the persona. And so I think if he hadn't done some of those things, people would be watching and saying, oh, that's a different Donald Trump. It's not the same guy. I think the person with the onus tonight was Kamala Harris, who's still not very well known. And I think tonight what you take away from it and everything she says and in the days to come, what I think a lot of voters, real voters, not political pundits, not people like me, just people that are out there in the real world watching this that are going to be voting, that aren't daily political people, they're taking away from it. We don't know a lot about her. And tonight we found out she either basically is the same as Joe Biden on public policy or even potentially farther to the left, given her positions in 2019 and 2020, when she wanted to pay for the transgender surgeries of illegal migrants in detention, when she was raising money to bail out rioters. A lot of people didn't know she was doing that, where she wanted to defund ICE. Or she's just like Don. And by the way, one of the most outrageous moments tonight, she stood there and basically touted what happened in Afghanistan as a success. That it was a great success. It was a humiliation. It was a disaster. It was not a withdrawal. It was a retreat, and a costly retreat. It cost 13 American lives, cost our national prestige.
She tried to put it back on the Trump campaign in the sense that these were dates that were previously established and negotiated by the Trump administration.
Well, that's what she said. That's a lie, because there was no dates that said the Taliban runs you out. What happened there basically was the Taliban forced the Afghan government that she was bragging about, it just collapsed. They just abandoned their posts. They ran us out of the country. They gave us 72 hours to get out, and we had to leave behind $90 billion worth of equipment that they were just parading around the other day. That was not a part of any Trump plan. That most certainly was not part. That was a result of the collapse of that government due to the malfeasance, malpractice of the State Department and the Department of Defense. Not a single person's been fired for it. Everybody sees it for the humiliation that it was, even Democrats. And she's bragging about it as a great success. But there's a lot more to unpack here. Tonight, for the first time, that 25% of Americans that say they wanted to learn more about her, they're beginning to learn that, in fact, she was not born on July 24th of this year. She was vice president. She's been there when 50% increases happened in our groceries bill. She's been in the White House when over 10 million people have entered this country unlawfully over the last 3.5 years.
Can I ask you about immigration?
Yeah.
Obviously, this is something that you've spoken about, and so has the former president. Polls show that Americans, voters, at least right now, trust former President Trump more on the issue of abortion. But does it help his case when he comes out?
Immigration.
On immigration, forgive me. On immigration, but does it help his case case when he comes out and talks about things like, migrants kidnapping and eating pets in Ohio? Does that help his
there's
case?
people, listen, I don't know if that's true or not true. And what he said tonight was that there are people out there putting that on social media.
Government officials have told us that.
The city manager said they had no reports of it, but there are actual people, real people who are claiming this, and that it's happening in Springfield, Ohio, that's had like an influx of 15 or 20 million migrants brought here under this parole program. And that's claims that people are making, and that's what he's pointing to. But irrespective of that, beyond it, the people, I was just in Ohio last week, and people were talking about Springfield, and what they were saying is it has been a real burden on, that same city manager, I believe, was the one that came out and said, we have a housing crisis because they flooded our community with people that were brought in under the Biden parole program. The Biden immigration program has been a complete and absolute disaster. It has led to 9 or 10 million people.
Oh, and here, Marco Rubio sort of being a surrogate for the Trump campaign and telling us, what, the campaign stands in terms of some of the topics that were talked about in the debate. But one of the points that he made earlier in the segment here was, of course, that Kamala Harris didn't manage to present really, herself and her brand of politics to the American people tonight. And, being that she comes, sort of from the back, because we don't know much about her. She hasn't been a national, sort of forefront politician for a long time. She's been a VP, but she was chosen as a VP because she was a little bit unknown and she wasn't going to throw shade over Joe Biden. And now all of a sudden they're putting her as the candidate, and we don't know much about her. And tonight she did not manage to deliver that much and to really tell us who she is. Let's switch on to Fox News now, where we have RFK here. Let's have a look.
This is not only false. I think
that's
it's
the
fair
wrong
to.
one. Sorry.
It doesn't exist anymore. The party of Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy was a party of peace. It was the party of resisting the corporate subversion of American democracy. It was the party of civil rights and constitutional rights, particularly censorship, very opposed to censorship and surveillance. It was the party of protecting the most vulnerable people in our society, including particularly children. Today, the Democratic Party is the party of war. It's the party of censorship. It's the party of surveillance. We saw Dick Cheney and John Bolton endorse, along with 255 neocons, endorse Vice President Harris this week. They came out of exile, where they were sent after the Patriot Act. They were sent after the war in Iraq, the biggest foreign policy debacle in American history. And they're not endorsing Vice President Harris because they've changed their minds. They're endorsing her because she represents their worldview. More censorship, more war, more surveillance, and less liberty and constitutional rights.
You learned a lot in the course of your campaign. They talk about democracy in peril, but everything, the entire force of the Democratic establishment, if you will, they just went in for the political, death of your campaign. They did not want you to get to. They didn't want you to get at first base.
That's the other
ballot.
That's the other thing, is that they've abandoned democracy. The Democratic Party is now about centralized control. It's about losing faith in the demos, the people, and about abolishing elections, abolishing our ability to hear different points of view, to hear dissent. In my case, of course, they got rid of the primaries. They literally abolished many of the primaries so that President Biden wouldn't have to debate me, wouldn't have to run against me.
Let me dip in. I guess Kamala's at one of her watch parties or something. I don't know what she's saying. Let's just dip in for a second.
And let me just say that I think we all know that tonight was a night that highlights something that you all have been working so hard on. We have folks here who have been knocking on doors. Well, but we have a lot of work to do, okay? And tonight, I think, highlighted for the American people what's at stake. I started the debate by talking about it, and it became apparent, I think, throughout that about an hour and a half, that
So obviously she's going to go out there and her team. The thing that I learned about her tonight is, you know, being hidden away for days and days and days on end. You can learn your rehearsed lines, and it doesn't matter if you tell the truth because she wasn't fact-checked. She told a lot of lies about Trump in 2025, lies about mandatory gun buybacks, which she did support, lying about fracking, lying about a national abortion ban that Donald Trump doesn't support. And, you know, it's hard when you've got 3-on-1 like that. But that's what I expect. She's been in this campaign 50 days. We only have 56 days till Election Day, but early voting, for example, I've been pointing out tonight, starts right here 1 week from tonight. There's a lot of information about her stated views in her own words that people don't know about. What would you advise the Trump people to do to get that out?
Here was the most telling part of the debate to me, which she didn't get fact-checked on. The first question, are Americans better off than they were 4 years ago? There's no metric that you can use to make that case. And she was allowed to then go and give this kind of biographical sketch of herself without ever asking that question, and they never demanded that she ask it. Today, we have double the inflation that we had under President Trump.
Yeah.
We have
All right, hang on 1 second. President Trump is in the spin room, and let's listen in. Do we have audio of that?
Foreign trade was everything, and I think it was the best debate
The cameraman is having a little bit of trouble here.
Mr. President, speak louder! 88 to 11. We're having a lot of great polls that just came out there. Phone calls and lots of other polls, but you see the polls. A very important debate. Now, she wants to do another one because she got beaten tonight, but I don't know. Why wouldn't you look at her? The polls are indicating that we got 90%, 60%, 72%, 71%, and 89%.
Where are you getting these numbers from?
Very good. But beyond the polls, I felt very good. I had a good time doing it. I hate to speak about our country so negatively, but that's what happened. They ruined our country. They destroyed our country. So I hope you're all having a good time. It was a very interesting.
Did she get under your skin, sir?
So confident you won tonight. Why are you here? Why not let the performance speak for itself?
Well, I think it did, but people said, would I come here? And I made an obligation to a couple of people to do their show. But it was I thought it was a great night.
What about Taylor Swift?
I have no idea.
Mr. President,
Well, the Fox News cameraman here cannot keep the camera steady. What is wrong with him?
The moderators were very unfair, but it basically was 3-on-1. But I thought they were very unfair.
Is he trying to make us nauseous?
Despite that, they're saying that
Mr. President,
why not a second debate?
I assume the moderators would be that right there is the worst of all these issues.
Mr. President,
why not a second debate?
She wants a second debate because she lost tonight in her head. So they immediately called for a second debate because they lost. So we'll, think about that. But she immediately called for a second. Look,
If she lost, will you do it? Will you do it?
We can hear this woman screaming at the top of her lungs. What are you doing?
Mr. President,
No, see.
did she get under your skin? President Trump, over here.
And of course, as we had mentioned earlier, now the Harris campaign is going to have to try to get a second debate out of the Trump campaign. But will Trump give her that? Will he give her a chance to sort of turn the tide around and have another chance of making her case to the American people after not really managing to show the audience in America, the voters, really what her brand would be. This camera work is terrible here from Fox News.
All right, Joe, we can't really hear a lot of it. I've just been told President Trump may make his way over here and join us live, which would be great. But first, we have the free state of Florida governor, my governor, Ron DeSantis, is with us. Governor DeSantis, great to have you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good, Sean. Good to see you.
You know, you kind of had your own little version of a kind of big moment debate with Gavin Newsom, which I thought was a lot of fun for me to be able to be a part of and moderate. These debates are interesting. I would argue that was far more substantive than Kamala Harris and cliches and no questions about the most radical positions any one person has ever taken in her life. And that, to me, is a failure of ABC. I think they're the biggest loser of everybody tonight, and they did a disservice to the American people because there's so much that they did not ask her that we need answers to. Do you still support the Green New Deal? That would destroy capitalism. Do you still support, you know, government-run health care for all? It would eliminate private health insurance. Do you still support, you know, free housing, health care, education, and sex change operations for illegals? No fracking, no drilling, defund, dismantle. I mean, there's so much there. I'm at this point getting frustrated that nobody will pin.
And of course, ABC couldn't ask her that. They couldn't, you know, ask her curveballs. They had to. Let's see what Ron Sanders here is saying.
Did a debate with Biden and Trump. You know, I'll give Dana Bash and Tapper credit. They asked questions. They got out of the way. They were substantive. They really weren't biased. And we, you know, for CNN, I think a lot of people were surprised. This one, they only asked the follow-ups to Donald Trump to try to pin him down. They tried to fact-check him, but fact-checking him on things that he was right on, like some of the late-term abortion laws in some of the liberal states. Donald Trump was right about that, and they incorrectly fact-checked him. They never fact-checked Kamala Harris. She repeated lies like the Charlottesville fine people hoax and other things. Never called her to account. But you're right, Sean. From the very first question, she was asked, are Americans better off today than they were 4 years ago? She did not answer the question. She started rambling on about growing up in a middle-class family, which I'm sure is nice, but that doesn't answer why you have been in power for 3.5 years and Americans are worse off. They did not pin her down and ask follow-up questions on all her flip-flops. She acts like she's always been a big supporter of fracking, never addressed her open borders past. And so, yes, it was a 3-on-1 debate. It was disappointing that she didn't have her feet held to the fire by the moderators. They went out of their way to try to do that to Donald Trump. But I think people that take away from this debate, even with all that, Donald Trump is the candidate that's going to change things. Kamala Harris is the candidate that, as President Trump said in his closing statement, she's been there 3.5 years. Why hasn't she fixed any of these problems during that time? She does not have an answer to that question.
You know, it doesn't, but, you know,
let's go now. On CNN, we have J.D. Vance. Let's see what he says.
Precision behind them. And what is most interesting, and it's really the sort of microcosm of this entire race, is Kamala Harris has a record. Donald Trump has a record. Donald Trump is proud of his record and is running to it. Kamala Harris is running away from her record and pretending that somehow her term as president is going to be radically different from her term as vice president, but she can't actually articulate why. And in fact, to the extent that she articulates it at all, it's by running away from positions that she clearly held just a few years ago or even a few weeks ago.
So why didn't Trump push her more on that? Because that is what we hear from you every day on the campaign trail, is talking about her reversals. He did not really talk about why haven't you done what you're saying you'll do until his closing statement. Do you think he should have done that sooner?
Well, I think he did. I mean, he did it in the closing statement. He also really hammered her on her inconsistencies, right? This is a person who said she wanted to ban fracking. Now she says she doesn't. She wanted to defund the police. Now she said she doesn't. She wanted a secure border. I thought he really did, actually. On 3 issues in particular, I think he was very focused on hammering Kamala Harris's inconsistencies with her record, what she says now versus what she said even a few weeks ago in some cases. It was on the border, it's on fracking, and it's on defund the police. That was clearly what he's most focused on, and I think it's not surprising because those are 3 of the issues that the American people care the most about. I mean, look, this is a person who was to the far left of her own party and now is trying to pretend that she's effectively Donald Trump. My favorite line of the night is when he said she's going to don a MAGA cap and pretend that she agrees with me on everything. I think the American people are too smart to be fooled by Kamala Chameleon acting to be somebody that she's clearly not.
Yeah, she kind of smirked when he said that he was going to send her one. On abortion, though, Trump was asked if he would veto a national abortion ban. You have said that he would. He said that the two of you have not talked about that you weren't talking for him. Have the two of you not talked about that?
So we haven't talked about a veto, but it's clear that Donald Trump doesn't believe in a national abortion ban. He said that his policy is to let the states decide majority of abortion policy in this country. And so I think that really it's a difference of semantics. He thinks it's absurd to even talk about vetoing a piece of legislation that has no chance of being brought. I think it's a totally reasonable point. But again, the main substantive issue is Donald Trump believes that abortion should be a state policy, and Kamala Harris fundamentally thinks that abortion should be funded by taxpayers right up to the moment of birth.
We got Tulsi Gabbard here on
is
ABC.
That President Trump really brought voice to the American people who are concerned about crime on their streets, who are concerned about illegal immigrants, millions of illegal immigrants crossing the border, and how this doesn't just affect the border communities. This is affecting, in a very negative way, communities all across the country. He kept coming back to these issues. He kept coming back to the economy and how more and more Americans are continuing to struggle to afford basic necessities, groceries, gas, supplies, things that they are reminded of every single day, that their dollar is going shorter and shorter. It doesn't go as far as it used to be. These are the issues that the American people are most concerned about, and quite frankly, that Kamala Harris not only didn't really speak to or address, but she also didn't recognize and admit the fact that people are in this position today given the Biden-Harris administration's policies, and that they have been the ones in the White House these past 4 years, not Donald Trump.
So you talked about immigration and the economy. Those are two issues that voters have trusted, at least in the polling shows they trust Trump a bit more. But one area where he's been vulnerable has been abortion. And we heard from Nikki Haley earlier. She suggested that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance need to change the way they speak about women. Tonight, there were some heated exchanges over the issue of abortion. Trump himself has struggled to sort of define where he stands right now. How do you think he handled that part of the debate?
I think he clarified and told the truth about a lot of things that Kamala Harris accused him of that were outright lies. She was trying to tell the American people that he supports a federal abortion ban. He does not. She tried to tell the American people that he's trying to ban IVF, something that's personal to me because it's something that my husband and I, for years, tried to start our own family through the use of IVF. It didn't work out for us, works out for a lot of families. President Trump was quick on the draw when that Alabama court ruled, and he immediately said, no, we have to protect IVF, and the Alabama state legislature took action. She continued to say things. She's trying to say he's trying to ban birth control. That is also 100% false. So President Trump, I think, did a good job in clarifying the truth after Kamala Harris continued to lob lie after lie at him, saying things that he stood for that frankly just are not true.
Well, the former president made some false claims, too. He said that, there were states that wanted to kill babies after they were born. We fact-checked that a bunch of times, even prior to the debate. There is not a single state in this country that would allow that sort of thing. But I want to ask you about something else. He also made a pretty serious allegation saying that he took a bullet to the head because of the way Democrats, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, have been talking about him, saying that he's a threat to democracy. You're a former Democrat. Do you think that Democrats are to blame, at least in part, for that assassination attempt? And remember, the FBI says they don't know what the motive was in that attack.
There is no doubt in my mind that those who use such insightful rhetoric as calling Donald Trump the same as our modern-day Hitler, not once, not twice, but year after year after year after year, it doesn't take an FBI, it shouldn't take an FBI investigator to add 1 + 1 = 2. People always say, well, what would you have done if you were in a position where you could have stopped Hitler back during World War II? To think that any person watching them call Donald Trump today's modern-day Hitler wouldn't take it upon themselves to say, hey, maybe I should be that hero to go and take out this man who these people I see on television, who these powerful people in Washington are saying is our modern-day Hitler, then you're not actually living in the real world. There are consequences to using that dangerous, insightful rhetoric, and it would not...
Seriously, when they say they're...
Strange that somebody could support something as radical as sex change operations paid for by taxpayers for convicts and illegal immigrants, and for illegal immigrants free housing, health care, education, and not get asked a question about it?
But I brought it up.
You did bring it up.
Of course, they weren't so happy when I brought it up, but I brought it up. I brought up the fact that they're doing sex change operations on illegal immigrants And those are expensive operations, and they shouldn't be done for a lot of reasons.
There were a lot of things said that weren't true about you tonight, that you would support a national abortion ban.
Yeah.
You've never said that.
I never said
that you support Project 25.
Correct.
You never read it? I don't even know what it is either.
I don't want to read it.
Okay, number two, that she said in 2000, I took back my position on banning fracking.
Yep.
No, CNN fact-checked that and said no. The mandatory gun buyback at the end of the debate, she lied about that too.
That's right. That's right.
And you
She
did
wants
call
to
her out for a lot of
confiscate. I called her out on everything that you said. I think I got everything out. Now, with all of that being said, I was amazed because I really thought they'd be fair. I have to say, CNN a few weeks ago was sort of fair against Biden. Yeah. But this one was stacked. I figured it would be after watching 100% positive coverage of her. And she's done a terrible job as vice president. And look, she's the worst vice president we've ever had. She was the border czar, the worst border ever in the history of the world, not just in our country. And he's the worst president we've ever had.
So
Sean, they're destroying our country.
I'm very aware. And if we look at her tax plan, which is, okay, price gauging or gouging, and the largest tax increase not only in American history but world history, her campaign is saying tonight, Washington Post is reporting, that she wants a second debate. What's your answer?
Because she lost. She wants it because she lost.
Do you have an answer?
Well, I don't know. I have to think about it. But if you won the debate, I sort of think maybe I shouldn't do it. Why should I do another debate? She immediately said, we want another debate. That's, you know what happens when you're a prize fighter and you lose? You immediately want a new fight.
You want a rematch.
You want a rematch. The guy that won is sort of happy and thinking about it.
Would you be inclined to say yes, or you
Maybe
don't know?
if it was on a fair network, I would do that. But
I think let Hannity moderate it.
Yeah, no, I think
like
that
I
would be
did Newsom and Ron DeSantis.
I think it would be fair. You would be fair, actually.
I would be
you
fair.
want to know the truth.
I'd let you both talk. I'd let you go at each other.
I thought they would be fair. They weren't, but I felt very comfortable.
Yeah.
We have the best policy. She has no policy.
You know, one thing that interested me, because I've known you for a long time, and one of the things that I was watching in you tonight is that you were all business. You know, a lot of times when you're at your rallies or we do a town hall.
Sean, they're destroying our country.
Is that what it was? Is it the seriousness of the moment?
There's nothing to smile about. You know, I'm a good smiler, but there's nothing to smile about. They're destroying. We have 21 million people that have been released into our country, and many of them are criminals and terrorists and people from mental institutions.
Rachel Morin, Jocelyn Nungary.
All dead.
I list all these names on the show of people murdered, people raped, people victims of violent crime, names a lot of people never heard of. You've called Laken Riley's family.
I did. I was with them.
Who else you've met other families? You met the families of
I met them all.
Afghanistan.
Nungary. I met.
You met Nungary's family.
Yeah, I met 5 or 6 of them. Not even talking about the 13 soldiers that were killed in Afghanistan, the families of the 13 soldiers, which Biden won't even talk to, and he's the one that caused their death. Just as if he had a pistol in his hand, he and her caused their death. Just as if literally they had a gun in their hand.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. When you're in a situation like that, what is going through your mind? What goes on behind the scenes? How do you prepare for your debates?
Well, I think I always say I've been preparing all my life for these debates. You know, you can't go in like she did. She goes into a room and she memorized lines, more or less. I thought I got one cute one. I'm talking when I said, I'm talking, when she started interrupting me.
Well, she said that to Mike Pence.
I wanted to get
speaking.
even for that. You know, that was not very nice what she did. But no, I thought it was, we're getting great reviews.
It's interesting that the one line that really stuck out, that did make me laugh out loud, is when you said you're going to send her a MAGA hat. There are a lot of positions now, all of a sudden, she's come over to your side. She's been against the border wall. She's been against...
There's only one problem.
Yeah.
If she ever won, immediately from the day after that election, everything would go back to confiscate your guns and forget about oil and everything else. You know, they were cutting back on oil way back. They got rid of NTWAN, the biggest oil site perhaps in the world, in Alaska. They did things that are so bad and so destructive, but energy prices started doubling up. And she immediately went back to the Trump plan. But I would have been now 4 times higher than they are right now, because that was 3.5 years ago.
Right.
When she cut everything out. She went to wind and went to all this other stuff that doesn't work from an economic standpoint and even a visual standpoint. I don't get the wind. You take these gorgeous plains and deserts and all this stuff. They put these windmills up. They go up like a 30-story building in some cases.
All right. And so here Donald Trump is sort of going to continue his messaging. And I don't think it doesn't look like we're going to see Kamala Harris come by the spin room to talk to the media. They probably have taken her for a debrief of the debate, and they're probably scrambling to sort of figure out what the next move is going to be. While here you can see Vivek Ramaswamy here and Tim Scott just laughing and having a good time in the background here while Donald Trump is being interviewed by Hannity. And, it sort of shows the mood here, having Kamala Harris not coming to speak to the press, not even to CNN or to ABC. Those networks were friendly to her. It doesn't really inspire good here for Kamala Harris. But I think one of the most moment that can summarize what happened tonight was sort of the intervention by RFK, telling the viewers, the Democratic Party just has lost its way and it doesn't stand for what it used to stand for. It doesn't stand anymore for, the common folks and people who are sort of struggling. They've embraced this neoliberalism brand of politics, which, as sort of a, been, the summary of the Joe Biden administration, where you see the stock market at all-time high, the Magnificent Seven having valuation that are through the roof, while at the same time inflation is at its top, and then the Democrats sort of coming in a undemocratic way, preventing RFK from even running in the primaries, installing Joe Biden as the only allowable candidate, just to then take him off the stage and replace him with Kamala Harris, that has not gotten any votes in the party primaries, while, they sort of put RFK aside. And now he has joined side with Trump. And same thing for Tulsi Gabbard. So you're seeing sort of two Democrats that were not mainstream Democrat, but sort of fringe Democrats, but they did represent sort of a faction of the Democratic Party now having joined forces with Trump. And, it's sort of like you can see the Democratic base, the populist Democratic base that used to represent sort of the common folks, being eroded and won over by Trump. And, for the rest of this campaign and to this election, this is going to be the faction that's going to determine sort of the fate of this election. Are the people who used to vote for the Democrats, who have voted for the Democrats so far and for so long, are they going to follow suit like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard? And are they sort of going to vote for their wallet, with their wallet, instead of voting with their sort of ideals? And are they going to join, sort of forces with Trump? Are they going to vote for Trump, sort of pinch their nose and vote for Trump just so that they can have better days financially, despite, of course, the controversial nature of Trump himself? That remains to be seen, and that's going to be sort of, the deciding factor here in this campaign. But of course, as for the debate tonight, you will see, of course, over the next few days, sort of the partisan media, CNN, and we've seen with their sort of main talking point, Kamala Harris got a rise out of Donald Trump and she got under his skin. But it's not really an achievement that you want to boast being the only thing that we can remember from you while being on the big stage on what could be the only presidential debate of this election between the candidates. and having failed in the number one task, the most important task that was for Kamala Harris was to bring her own brand of politics and her ideas to the forefront and present to the American people what her plan for a Harris administration would be. And, you know, of course, she was the one who had to sort of do the work in this debate, and she didn't manage to carry that. And as for Trump, of course, Trump being Trump, doing the same thing that he's been doing now for years, and nothing is going to change for him. But now the onus is sort of going to be on Kamala Harris and the Harris campaign. And they have now, you know, a little bit less than a couple of months to go out there in front of the media and try to persuade the American people that Kamala Harris is not Joe Biden, and that a Harris administration would be different for America than a Joe Biden administration was, and that somehow they're going to have to convince the American voters that if they elect Kamala Harris, they're going to be better off mostly financially than they are now. And it's going to be very difficult for her to do that, considering sort of the policy record that she has and the policies that she's proposing. It's basically, you know, mission impossible. She's going to have to sort of do this this weird dance at the same time, you know, sort of obfuscating her record as a vice president and, you know, the record of the Biden-Harris administration, while at the same time convincing people I'm going to do something different, but don't look into my policies because my policies are exactly the same as the policies of Biden. So I don't know how she's going to do that. And she's going to need to do a lot of media interventions to be able to pull that off. And the question is the campaign even going to want her to go out there and do that? Because so far, they have not wanted her to go in front of the media. They were too worried that she could be making mistakes and that that would hurt her campaign. But as time is going to pass from now until the election, she's going to find herself, you know, sort of against the ropes, and she's going to have to go out there and explain her ideas and her policies in a convincing way to the American people with, of course, a sort of set of policies that are going to contradict the message that she needs to get out there. A very, very difficult task for Kamala Harris. I'm not sure how she's going to do that, but for sure she's going to need a lot of media appearances, and she's probably going to need another debate where she can sort of right the wrongs of this first debate and bring the focus sort of onto policy and why her policy would allow and you know, sort of bring America to a different situation financially, and regular Americans into a different financial situation. And it's going to be very difficult for that. And the question then is going to be, does the Trump campaign even gives her the chance to do that? And my guess is going to be no. And so, you know, this could be very well the only debate that we're going to see between those two candidates. I don't know I don't think I can remember any time before where we have a presidential election with only one debate. Maybe it has happened in the past, I'm not sure, but usually we get many. But here, of course, a sort of a weird situation after Biden dropping out of the race after the first debate. But now, you know, a difficult situation from Kamala Harris and the need for her to go out there on the stage, put herself in front of the press. And yeah, definitely she's going to need a new debate. And I'm guessing her campaign is going to try to work hard to try to get Trump to agree to another debate. I don't see any reason why Trump would as of today. But of course, we're going to have to see. You know, we're still a couple of months away until the election. And polling is, my guess, what is going to determine whether the Trump campaign allows Kamala Harris to get another debate. If the polling starts to move into a direction that favors Harris, then Trump is going to want to bring her back again on the debate stage to sort of do the same thing that he did tonight. But if the polling starts to move in Trump's favor over the next coming weeks, then I don't see Trump granting her another debate. And if that is the case, it's going to be an uphill battle for Kamala Harris and her campaign. But anyway, we will see. If you have stayed with us all this time, well, thank you for watching this live stream of the presidential debate. And please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And I will see you all on our next video. Of course, we will be covering this campaign all along the way until the final day. So subscribe to the channel and don't miss another video. Thank you very much for watching this, and I will see you on the next one.
Hit me with that like and sub to the channel. Hit me with that like and click the effing bell. Click that bit, alright. The algo recommends for sure you don't like. The algo knows you well. Hit me with that like, subscribe to the channel. Hit me with that like and click the